This is a Civic Media News special report. Everything you need to know live from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Now your hosts, Todd Allbaugh and Civic Media News Director Terry Bell.
Good evening from Civic Media's Broadcast Center overlooking Fiserv Forum in downtown Milwaukee and what's turned out to be a beautiful night. I'm Terry Bell, and welcome to Night 2 of Civic Media's special coverage of the Republican National Convention. Over the next hour, we'll give you the facts and the flavor of what happened at the convention today and some perspective from our analysts. But first, we welcome my co-host for the hour, just a few blocks away at Wisconsin Media Row in Panther Arena. The host of the Todd Allbaugh Show is, you guessed it, Todd Allbaugh. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Terry. Great to be with you and everyone else around the state of Wisconsin tonight. You're right. After a pretty spectacular lightning show here in the greater Milwaukee area last night, the skies have cleared, and now perhaps there are other political storms on the horizon. More about those tonight. But here at Wisconsin Media Row, it's been another busy day. We've seen Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman and Tom Tiffany walk through the area here amongst us. Also, former Wisconsin Governor Tommy Thompson. He is on the Trump train and walking through and greeting people like nobody else can. And also U.S. Senate candidate Eric Hovde, among others, making their way through the area tonight. And, of course, the Senate candidate, Republican Senate candidate Eric Hovde, is slated to speak on the stage tonight, if he hasn't already, in prime time here at the Republican National Convention. So certainly bustling here. Lots more, it feels like. I'm not sure if you picked up on it, Terry. It feels like a lot more foreign media here, foreign press. Lots of languages being spoken. The eyes of the world are on Milwaukee this week, like they will be in Chicago about a month from now for the DNC.
Yeah, I heard some beautiful languages and accents walking around the campus today, so you're absolutely right. This does have the attention of the world. You mentioned Eric Hovde a moment ago. Yes, he did, in fact, speak about an hour ago, about a 4-minute address, one of several U.S. Senate candidates speaking to the convention early on in the proceedings. Was just kind of line him up and let him go for just a short amount of time. And in that speech, as you might imagine, Eric Hovde laid many of the problems of the United States and the world at the feet of Joe Biden and Tammy Baldwin. You would expect him to do that, and we'll have more highlights and analysis of that coming up.
Yeah, this is one of these stages, literally and figuratively, where Mr. Hovde is trying to gain some traction a little bit. So far, he's had trouble doing so. I mean, here's a person who is fighting this campaign from Democrats and from Senator Baldwin herself, saying, look, you're really not from Wisconsin. You're based out of California. And Mr. Hovde not doing a lot to dissuade people that. About a month ago, he was scheduled to be at a Republican Party event in Oconto County, Oconto County, just north of Green Bay. He canceled that, and the paparazzi in the greater Los Angeles area captured Mr. Hovde on the beach in Orange County, near Laguna Beach, where he has a $7 million or so house, where he's the president of a bank out there. So he kind of keeps making these same mistakes, and strictly from a person who ran a lot of campaigns over my life for the Republican side of the aisle after then leaving the party in 2011, not exactly what you want in a candidate. The thing I just mentioned, he's also been caught on tape, or there's records from Steve Walter, the great journalist now at Wisconsin Eye, in which he says he wants to tax overweight people more for health insurance, or makes them pay more for health care. Again, if you're running a campaign, you don't want your candidate saying these types of things. Makes it very difficult. Meanwhile, Democratic incumbent Tammy Baldwin just going around the state, going to Richland County, the farmers or the dairy breakfast, giving out cheese curds and grilling pancakes. So I'm not sure whether this is the platform that Eric Hovde can get back on track, but he's giving it the old try.
Well, as if anticipating your critique, he did mention during his speech about an hour ago that his family's roots go back to Wisconsin. He says 100 years, and I think you'll hear him saying that a lot more often during the summer and fall. You mentioned the traction. A YouGov poll was released today or last night, and it shows Baldwin with a 7-point lead, 50 for Baldwin, 43% for Hovde. But of course, it's only July.
And it's only July, and I think that's probably what worries the Republicans, because Tammy Baldwin having a 7-point lead in that poll in July, it makes it much harder for her to, for Eric Hovde to catch up as things progress. But like you say, I mean, we're still in July. There's time. We'll see. Certainly, how things happen at the top of the ticket. We talk in political terms of coattails. Does the top of the ticket, in this case, the presidential candidate, do they have coattails that will go down and help people down ballot or beneath them on the ballot? I think that's one of the questions here. I mean, we've talked about it on our show at Trygve Olsen. He's going to be joining us a little bit later in this broadcast, along with other panelists here. We've talked about energy. Enthusiasm, electoral enthusiasm to turn out your base. All of the, we've said on this network, we denounce any sort of political violence, but and that's very true, if you strictly look at enthusiasm, the events of Saturday, over the weekend, the attempted assassination of former President Trump, it has solidified and energized this base. I was not in the bowl last night, but talking to reporter colleagues who were there last night, they said it was, quote, energetic and enlivened last night. And Trump didn't even speak. He just came out and sat down. Can Joe Biden repeat that same energy in Chicago next month and get their base unified? I think that's going to go a long way in determining, perhaps in part, the outcome between Baldwin and Hovde on the U.S. Senate ticket.
That's a perfectly good point, and that's something that Democrats in Wisconsin in particular are perfectly aware of. And in fact, when you talk to strategists and candidates, they talk about what they call reverse coattails. In that meaning that usually the lower ballot ticket candidates sort of ride the wave that the person at the top of the ticket. What Democrats are hoping in Wisconsin is that there is enough energy and enthusiasm for state assembly candidates, for state senate candidates, local candidates, even more local than that, and that then those people will go up the ticket and check that box for Biden, or circle in that oval. I'm dating myself.
Well, it depends on what form. There's all kinds of ways to vote now, right?
That's true. That's true.
But you're right. Mm-hmm. I think Tammy Baldwin could actually help Joe Biden in Wisconsin. I don't think that's off the table. So you could see some reverse coattails here. Can Donald Trump pull Eric Hovde across the finish line? I don't know. Tough to see, but when you literally jump in a lake to start your campaign, but that's what Eric Hovde did. But what time will tell. We shall see.
Yeah, just to remind everybody, we are live in Milwaukee. We are at the Fiserv Forum campus nearby. I'm just across the street, down a couple of blocks, and Todd is at Media Row in Panther Arena in downtown Milwaukee, and you're listening to live coverage of Civic Media's recap of the Republican convention on this Tuesday. And the day started out with reaction to the nomination of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate. And that was a choice that you would imagine energized the people here in Milwaukee. There are plenty of critiques coming from further left on the spectrum, as you would expect. And the issues that Vance's critics would be quick to point out would be his stances on, how he would handle a constitutional crisis like January 6th, reproductive rights and immigration, just to name a few.
Yeah, we're going to hear a cut, I think, a little bit later on in the show, Terry, J.D. Vance in his own words. But I think if you ask most political analysts, of the people at least that were known to be former President Trump's selection or choices for vice president, J.D. Vance is probably the most extreme, the most in line with him, at least now, in terms of being all in on the mega agenda. If you look at what he talks about in terms of women's health care, reproductive rights, if you look at things, as you mentioned, he is all in on authoritarianism, again, from his own words. He is all in on doing what Mike Pence would not, which is put Donald Trump ahead of the Constitution. If there was a constitutional crisis on the election. That may be the litmus test, or was the litmus test for Donald Trump, because Mike Pence was no liberal. He was certainly a hardline conservative on some of these same issues I just mentioned, abortion and women's health care in particular. But that wasn't enough for Donald Trump, because Pence, of course, didn't do Trump's bidding on January 6th, and Trump allowed the crowd to put up the gallows and chant "Hang Mike Pence" at the January 6th attempted insurrection. And so the real test here for Trump was, will you do what Mike Pence wouldn't? And apparently J.D. Vance has passed the test, even after, again, these are J.D. Vance's words, having in the past called Donald Trump, quote, the American Hitler, unquote. So things have changed in the last 3 years for J.D. Vance. He finds himself now atop the ticket alongside Donald Trump. And to your point, that is the choice that this seems to be in, kind of wandering around talking to people on the fly here, delegates from across the country. I haven't found anybody yet, Terry. I'm not sure in your reporting if you have. I have not found a delegate who's disappointed in Trump's choice of J.D. Vance.
No, I have not either. That's a good point. So J.D. Vance was all the talk this morning. A few hours later, there was an incident that redirected everyone's attention for an hour or two, and that was a law enforcement incident that happened about a mile or so from Pfizer Forum, just outside one of the security fences. And it turns out to be that it was not related to the convention. Two local men got into an altercation. It turns out to be a knife fight, and a law enforcement officer from Columbus, Ohio, who was here in Milwaukee to help keep the peace, used lethal force in order to quell this situation. So there was speculation, of course, when this first broke out, that this might have something to do with a protester or some sort of political violence. It turns out it was really not related to the convention directly, but it certainly does speak to, some of the problems that are going on around the country, and particularly in Milwaukee, and I'm sure those are conversations that people will be having throughout the days to come. In fact, the ACLU has already put out a statement wanting full transparency from the authorities about what happened today and why.
Yeah, we'll wait and see how this all shakes out. I think always important, as you allude to, Terry, not to speculate too far. Let's let the investigation take its course. But from what we know now, it appears, as you just said, it was a knife fight between two local gentlemen, and unfortunately someone lost their life today. We'll see what the report actually says.
Absolutely. Straight ahead, we'll recap some of the day's key moments here in Milwaukee, and a bit later, our panel joins us to sort through what it all means. You're listening to special coverage from Civic Media right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
You're listening to a Civic Media News special report. Everything you need to know live from the Republican National Convention. Once again, here's Todd Allbaugh and Terry Bell.
Welcome back to Civic Media special coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. I'm Terry Bell at Civic Media's Broadcast Center, a short walk from the convention, and my co-host is Todd Allbaugh, who's in Wisconsin Media Row at Panther Arena. For the next few minutes, we're going to take a time to listen to a recap of some of the highlights of today's events in downtown Milwaukee.
Police have reportedly shot and killed a person about 2.5 miles from Fiserv Forum, which is the main RNC venue. There's a large police presence near 14th and Fleet Streets. The officer who fired the fatal shot is from Ohio. Indications are that the incident is not related to the RNC. The latest poll has Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden in Wisconsin. It finds 43% of registered voters back Trump, while 38% support Biden. In March, Biden was up by 1 point. Wisconsin Republican Party Chair Brian Schimming says he's enthusiastic about J.D. Vance as Trump's running mate for a number of reasons.
He's a Midwesterner. He has a compelling life story. And frankly, I want to be the first one to sell tickets to the debate between J.D. Vance and the vice president.
But Vance wasn't always so big on Trump, launching scathing criticisms of Trump during the 2016 campaign. He explains to Sean Hannity of Fox News Network how he came to change his mind.
Well, Sean, I don't hide from that. I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president, and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans because, again, he delivered that peace and prosperity. If you go back to what I thought in 2016, another thing that was going on, Sean, is I bought into the media's lies and distortions. I bought into this idea that somehow he was going to be so different, a terrible threat to democracy. It was a joke.
Vance addresses the convention in prime time tomorrow night. Senator Ron Johnson going on the attack in his primetime speech at the RNC last night.
Today's Democrat agenda, their policies, are a clear and present danger to America, to our institutions, our values, and our people. Now they are the party of open borders, reckless spending, weaponized government, and weakness on the world stage.
After the speech, Johnson claimed in an interview that wasn't the speech he planned to give. His people aren't saying who changed it, how they did it, or why. Among other things, the GOP platform calls for the biggest deportation effort in U.S. history. Christine Newman Ortiz is a Milwaukee-based advocate for refugees and other immigrants.
We are not afraid of those that demonize us and promote hate and violence and division. We stand united and firm for justice and human rights.
She spoke to a crowd of hundreds of protesters that marched through downtown near the RNC perimeter. The theme of Day 2 of the convention is immigration and crime. Speakers tonight will talk about law enforcement and the southern border. 2 failed recall attempts are proving lucrative for Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, who was allowed to collect unlimited money during that time. Wisp Politics reports he pocketed nearly $640,000. Most of it, a cool $500,000, came from Republican donor Elizabeth Uline. The RNC was promised to be a boon to restaurants, stores, and other establishments in downtown Milwaukee, but Monday, many businesses say it was pretty slow.
We were kind of, tied up having to be at the convention hall, and so we're looking forward to some more flexibility in the next few days to go out and just be part of the community and get out to different places we couldn't yesterday.
Wisconsin delegate Stephanie Susick says they had to stick to a tight schedule.
And those are just some of the facts and a little bit of the flavor of today at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. And I forgot to mention earlier in the show that also much of the talk this morning, kind of the big story that blew up, was right after Senator Johnson's speech last night. A very different tone that he claims the speech he initially planned to give, which was a message of unity, turned out to be a very red meat speech. And a reporter talked to him about it. Johnson said he was upset. That wasn't the version of the speech he planned to give, but you can take that with however large a grain of salt you like.
Yeah, Terry, I would
Todd?
simply say, sorry about that. As a former longtime staffer at the congressional level and at the state senate level, it would be hard for me to imagine how at a stage this big the staff could load the wrong speech onto the teleprompter and Senator Johnson wouldn't realize it. It just seems implausible, to put it mildly, at this point. But I think maybe more importantly, it's just look at the content. I mean, again, it was a very red meat speech speaking to the base, and really it's not a fringe group, it is the MAGA Republican Party, because Senator Johnson's speech, one of the money lines is just a transphobia line, trying to be divisive and ginning people up. That's in deep contrast to what both Donald Trump and Joe Biden talked about over the weekend, which was trying to lower the temperature of political rhetoric. So I find that interesting. I also find interesting, Terry, you mentioned the theme tonight is, quote unquote, keep America safe again. Immigration and crime. Again, it's dividing people, trying to create boogie people for America's problems. Most Wisconsinites, Terry, and you grew up in Southwest Wisconsin, as did I. The fact is that one of the things Republicans don't want to talk about here is that if you got rid of migration, immigration, both legal and, let's be honest, some undocumented, the Wisconsin agricultural industry would collapse. That's just a fact. And if you ask
many people in the agriculture industry would say the same thing.
Yeah, and so they're creating boogie people of folks that are needed and are valuable parts of America's melting pot here. Remember, most of the people here are documented, actually. And so, and remember this, they're going to talk about American heroes, and Donald Trump is going to talk about pardoning criminals. I mean, I got up on my Twitter feed right now, this guy, Tim Sheehy, giving a speech here from Montana, Democrat or candidate for U.S. Senate out there in Montana. He said this just a while ago from the dais, quote, "Common sense is simple. Criminals are bad," unquote. Donald Trump comes to this convention as a 43-time found guilty criminal. I mean, the hypocrisy is a little bit beyond the pale here. And also, the people that committed these heinous crimes on January 6th, insurrectionists, treason, they were given a jury of their peers in many cases, or pled guilty and sentenced, and are in jail. So it seems not quite backing the blue, quote unquote, for the current iteration of the MAGA Republican Party to support these insurrectionists from January 6th.
It might be interesting to note that at 7:27 here on Tuesday evening, day 2 of the convention, is the first I've heard any mention of Donald Trump's felony convictions from anybody on any platform.
Well, I think it's an important point to point out here, Terry. And I think we're running out of time. We're up against the clock a little bit right now, but maybe we can play this cut a little bit later of J.D. Vance from George Stephanopoulos from earlier this year, in which he comes right out and says that he would not have done what Mike Pence did, which was stand up for the Constitution in the 2020 election results on January 6th, that he would have done what Trump wanted. He would have...
That may be so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, Todd. The news is straight ahead, and we'll listen more from J.D. Vance as our coverage, Civic Media special coverage, continues with our panel, Ruth Conniff of the Wisconsin Examiner and Trygve Olsen of the Lincoln Project. You're listening to Civic Media special coverage. Keep it right here. Let's do the Vance clip and then move on to the panel.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Back to issues that Republicans feel matter most to voters.
Look, I hope what we all do is we all start focused on the issues. Let's focus on how do we bring people together to solve the issues of the country. We know we have to secure our border. We got to get inflation under control. We got to get our budget under control. There's a lot of problems. Let's all come together to do it. So hopefully that's what's happening.
The delegates will hear from some of former President Trump's previous challengers this evening, including tech billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy and former South Carolina Governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. They just heard from Arizona Senate candidate and former TV news anchor Kari Lake. Mr. Trump is expected to make an appearance tonight. This is ABC News.
You can always continue the conversation on social media. Share your thoughts when you find and follow Civic Media on Facebook,
Trygve,
X,
can we get
and
a
Instagram.
mic check on you, please?
Check. For Civic Media News, I'm
Ruth, go
Savannah
ahead,
Tomei
please.
Olson.
Hi,
Here's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right. Bring it just a little bit closer to your mouth, please. All right, one more time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Excellent. Trigby?
1, 2, 3,
All right,
4,
very good.
5,
Thank
6.
All right, thank you.
5 coconut custard pies. That's
What's
where my
Terry
head went
drinking
from
over
that
there?
comic.
Where's Terry? What's Terry
Don't you
drinking
remember that
over
bit
there?
from Sesame Street?
Oh, absolutely.
That was a classic.
Terry Bell and Todd Allbaugh, the Bert and Ernie of Civic Media.
That would be Ernie in reverse.
That's
Ernie
actually
and
not
Bert.
bad.
It ain't.
9 coconut custard. 5.
Fast fingers, Zommers. Well done.
Hope that wasn't live over the air, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
No. It was on the stream, but that's the inside stuff.
Yeah,
Terry, are you at a safe and
streaming
secure,
audience gets to
undisclosed
enjoy.
location?
Sure. Yeah. That is not Pfizer Forum behind me. That's just some building just showed up.
He's on a green screen.
Yeah, there you go.
Advancements in DNA technology, they've identified their killer. The Winnebago County Sheriff says the killer's name is William
We gotta
Dockstader,
hire
and
that
he
Savannah
was
Tomei
on that
Olson.
original suspect
We really
list.
should.
Unfortunately,
She's good.
Dockstader won't
Yeah.
face justice.
Yes, absolutely.
He died 2 years ago. But now, Pratt's case is closed. And that's what you need to know. I'm Savannah Tomei Olson, Civic Media News.
I'm meteorologist Mace Michaels. Mostly clear tonight, low in the upper 50s. Mostly sunny for tomorrow, a high in the mid-70s and upper 70s with more sunshine Thursday. Mostly sunny and upper 70s to near 80 by Friday. Saturday and Sunday, a slight chance of showers, highs close to 80. Right now it's 80.
Hi, I'm Emily from Weikert Realtors Lake Point in Madison. Home ownership is a big deal, and so is taking the leap into the buying or selling of any property. The Weikert team gets that, and our job is to help you navigate the sales process and provide smooth sailing. You have questions? We can have answers. You have worries? We have solutions. Let us open the door to your future home. Weikert Realtors Lake Point, 608.
Now with traffic, here's Terry Bell.
002 2045 Atwood Avenue. Find
Air
more
traffic,
info
I
at
guess.
weikert-lakepoint.com.
G-E-double-R-Y.
Just so you guys know, we literally have a Coast Guard helicopter hovering overhead. So
Traffic running smoothly on the outbound Shaper.
but only during the show. We got 15 seconds, guys. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's
30
not right.
seconds.
30 seconds.
God, he's got a good radio voice.
He does.
Well,
And
you're
it's
welcome.
versatile. He can do news, traffic, after hours.
Oh, you're talking about Terry, not me. Never mind.
Civic Media After Hours. That's going to be our next project. Civic Media After Dark.
Stop. Please.
You're listening to a Civic Media News special report. Everything you need to know live from the Republican National Convention. Once again, here's Todd Allbaugh and Terry Bell.
Thank you and welcome back to Civic Media special coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Todd Allbaugh is with me. He's at Panther Arena and Wisconsin Media Row. I'm just a few blocks away from Pfizer Forum, where the primetime delegation, the primetime festivities, I should say, are underway tonight. We were talking a bit ago, Todd, about J.D. Vance, and in the days and weeks to come, we're going to hear more of his past statements and whether or not they jibe with his current positions and feelings. And there was some clips today that caught your ear.
Yeah, this is back from, I believe, February of this year. This is on This Week, the weekly program with George Stephanopoulos. And J.D. Vance, Senator Vance, was a guest on This Week. And George Stephanopoulos brought up this subject of January 6th. And if Vance was in that position as vice president, would he have done the same thing that Mike Pence did, which was choose the Constitution over Trump, or would he acquiesce to Trump's will? Here is that clip of J.D. Vance on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
Donald Trump.
So you're not troubled by the sexual assault and defamation. Let me ask you about January 6th. You've been mentioned as a possible vice president for Donald Trump. Had you been vice president on January 6th, would you have certified the election results?
Oh, George, this is such a ridiculous question, in part because the law has changed here. We, of course, had
well, I didn't ask you about going forward. I asked you what you would have done. I asked you what you would have done.
George, here's what I think. Here's what I think happened in 2020. And I know you guys are obsessed with talking about this. I have to make a point here. You constantly say to people like me, why do you talk about January the 6th? Why do you talk about the election of 2020? And then you ask about us multiple times during a 6-minute interview. But look, you asked the question and I'll answer it. Do I think there were problems in 2020? Yes, I do. Do I think it was a problem that big technology companies working with the intelligence services censored the presidential campaign of Donald Trump? Yes. Do I think it's a problem that Pennsylvania changed its balloting rules in the middle of the election season in a way that even some courts in Pennsylvania have said was illegal? Yes, I think these were problems, George, and I think there is a political solution to those problems. So litigating which slate of electors was legitimate, I think is fundamentally the political solution to the problems that existed in 2020. It's a reasonable debate to have, and I find it weird, George, that people like you obsessed with what I call what happened in 2020. You're so incurious about what actually happened in 2020, which is why so many people mistrust our elections in this country. We've got to do better, George.
I'm not the least bit incurious. In fact, you laid out a litany there, but you didn't answer the question I asked. Would you have certified the election results had you been vice president?
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020. I think that's what we should have done.
So it's very clear you would have done what Donald Trump asked you to do there, not what Vice President Mike Pence did. You said that that's...
That, of course, as we said, from George Stephanopoulos This Week, interviewing Senator J.D. Vance on if he were to be the vice presidential nominee or vice president. Tonight, he is the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. And Vance brings up this whole question of election integrity. I have a great book here by Major Garrett of CBS News and David Becker called The Big Truth. It is a complete compilation of looking back at the 2020 election, one of the freest, fairest elections, including in the state of Wisconsin. Major Garrett writes this, and Terry, then we'll get our panel involved. He says, quote, "There was a time when election officials, political reporters, political scientists, and historians worried if American democracy was dying from disinterest, not dying so much as withering. The question now are not about the participation or interest, but trust and reliability. There is no shortage of interest and energy around voting. There is more interest now about registering to vote, methods to vote, and the range of access to vote and how votes are counted. That interest is not neutral." Terry, joining us at the desk here from Wisconsin Media Row, we have the editor-in-chief, the Wisconsin Examiner, Ruth Conniff, and senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, Trygve Olsen. Ruth, let's start with you. You heard these comments from J.D. Vance, who is now tonight the GOP nominee for vice president. What say you? One say, I got to turn your mic on. That'd be a good thing. Go ahead.
I can't say anything like that.
Right, you can't say anything. Let's turn your mic on. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, election denial is a huge part of the Trump brand, and the Republicans who have folded their tents and decided to join this, Trump cult are absolutely required to pretend that they think that the election in 2020 was stolen. And here in Wisconsin, we're sitting here in a state that had a slate of fake electors for Donald Trump. They, as a condition of a settlement of a lawsuit, have admitted that they knew that Joe Biden won the election when they cast their ballots that were forwarded to Congress by Ron Johnson, who failed to give them to Mike Pence to be counted. But this is what J.D. Vance is talking about. We should have had more of this. We should have allowed these people who were impersonating legitimate electoral college voters cast fake ballots against the will of the people, undermine the election, and pretend that Trump won it. And then we should have spent a whole bunch of time debating whether that was legitimate. It's not legitimate. It's not legitimate. And the fake electors themselves in Wisconsin have admitted as much. So, this is all a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and it's very dangerous. They've managed to keep this idea alive that there's something wrong with the election system. It's led to death threats on these local clerks who are just trying to do a difficult job. A lot of this stuff is very boring. You have people show up to observe elections. They get tired and fatigued. It's really wonky stuff that is suddenly very hot and sexy because Trump continues to claim that he won the election. He did not win the election. And, this has been litigated. I mean, they are 0 for 50 in the court on this issue. So this is not something that needs further exploration. It's just a lie.
We're not very far from AmFam Field, the Brewers, talking about 0 for 50. Those aren't great baseball card results there.
Yeah.
Not a good deal. Trygve Olsen, you've grew up here in Wisconsin. You worked on elections in Wisconsin. You were part of McCain world for a long time. You fought for democracy around the world. To Ruth's point, this trend of denialism by our former party, it's just not healthy for democracy.
No, it's not healthy for democracy, and I kind of think, so they won, of all the litigation that they had, they won once on a technicality in Pennsylvania. So if you break J.D. Vance's answer down in detail, what he's doing there is he's basically taking one example where they won on a technicality but lost another, I think, 15 times, and trying to use that to say, well, there was a court that decided that way. And they will glam onto anything to keep sort of their narratives running. I think the other thing that would be interesting for Stephanopoulos to have asked J.D. Vance is if Kamala Harris decides that we should only count the states where Joe Biden wins this election, would he think that's okay? Like, right. She were concerned about, different things that are happening?
I think that's a great question. Terry?
Tonight, the theme of the convention is crime and immigration, and a lot of the platform, the candidate, is laying the problems of many of the problems of crime on immigrants, something that is statistically doesn't hold up. But I'm wondering what our panelists feel about what's being said tonight about those topics.
Ruth?
Well, this is another aspect of Trumpism that has been really toxic, and it's particularly toxic in Wisconsin, where 70% of the labor force in our dairy industry is undocumented immigrants. And so rural voters know that the dairy industry would go belly up overnight if they didn't have this workforce. So instead of demonizing these people and making their lives even harder, what the Republicans could do that would be productive would be to find a path for people to acknowledge what's been going on for decades here, which is that we are utterly dependent on this labor force. Instead of pretending that this is a wave of invaders who are coming to take our jobs, we could say, look, if you would like to work starting at 4 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, shoveling manure and milking cows, those jobs are available for you, right? I mean, it's a really it's a misleading narrative, and it's based on hate, and it's scary to me to think about the roundups that Trump is promising and the idea that, we really need to bear down on this kind of invisible workforce that is propping up more and more of our economy. We need to take a look at what we're doing, acknowledge it, and figure out what makes sense in terms of a system that says, okay, we need these folks to work for us, so what are we going to do to acknowledge it and to make it legit?
Trygve Olsen, you and I are about the same age. We're old enough to remember in the 1980 Republican presidential primary debate, Ronald Wilson Reagan and George H. Walker Bush had a debate on immigration in which Reagan said, well, they're trying to outdo each other. He said, well, I don't want to have a fence at all. I think we should have visas for people to go back and forth and work. I mean, that was the Republican Party of that you and I came up with. The MAGA Republican Party, to Ruth's point, very different.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but it's like a small minority within the party has consistently, when there has been bipartisan efforts to try and solve the problem, have gone out of their way to destroy them simply because they like to have the issue to demagogue. And in some ways, and then they have media allies who have discovered that extremism is a good business model. So at the end of the day, you have people who are distressed, maybe economic distress or other distress, but they're buying into these simplistic answers. If we just build the wall and then Mexico pays for it, then I don't have to worry about this. Or if we have internment camps and round them up, right? I mean, it's classic extremism, and it's classic acceptance of cognitively simplistic answers. And quite frankly, it's not even the best of what we are as Americans.
Here's Reed Ribble's been tweeting, former Republican congressman from Green Bay. He's looking at the Republican Party platform and giving his take on this. I think this is really good. This is a quote directly out of the 2024 Republican Party platform passed here in Milwaukee this week. Quote, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history, unquote. Reed Ribble, former Republican congressman, says this, quote, first, both Obama and Biden have deported more immigrants than Trump did in his term. Secondly, it's profoundly expensive and inflationary to do so. People like this idea until they have to pay the higher costs. Ruth?
Well, I mean, it just goes to what I'm saying. It's not just agriculture, it's construction, it's food service, it's hospitality. It's like, who's mowing the lawn, who's taking care of the kids, who's putting the roof on your house. It's just, it is really obnoxious to suddenly turn and point a finger at these folks. And, as Terry said, whose crime rate is a lot lower than native-born citizens in the United States. So it's a really toxic, demagogue move, and it's going to cause real harm. It's already caused real harm, violence against immigrants, and I totally agree with you that it's a kind of a fast move. It's scapegoating, and it's kind of interesting how it's part of this whole white injured, the injured masculinity of the white Midwesterner. That's, to me, that's the theme of this whole convention.
Trivia, what's that you?
Actually, there's a great video going around on Twitter. Did you see Matt Gaetz trying to taunt McCarthy?
Yeah.
Well, somebody else tweeted the interaction between some random delegate and Matt Gaetz, where he just basically calls him out, and Matt Gaetz backs down and runs away.
Wow.
Basically.
Incredible.
I mean, this is the thing, is you stand up to bullies, you stand up to autocrats. It just is what you have to do.
Give this to me, Trivia, in 1 minute or less. Reed Ribble, a common sense guy, a conservative, is going through this. Where are the Reed Ribbles of today? Why isn't Paul Ryan here? Where are these people? Is it just
we should find Paul Ryan and ask him. He's got to be here, right?
He's not here. No, he's not coming. No, he's not here.
Why isn't he here?
Because he said he wouldn't come. He's a never Trumper, and that's right. You know this.
I already knew that.
Trigby is just trying to have a little fun.
Honestly, where are the Reed Ribbles or the Paul Ryans? They all got frustrated and said, we're out of here.
Because they know it's not
that's
true
in essence
republicanism.
what they did. And at the end of the day, I say all the time, one of the rules for dealing with autocratic forces is the Stalin rule, right? If you're in a battle with the worst human being to ever live, you do what Churchill and Roosevelt did. You make alliances with the second worst one, because it's an alliance of convenience at the time, so you can live to fight another day. People have to understand, would I have liked Paul to have said more? Would I have liked Reed to probably have said more back in the day? Sure. But they're on our side now, and we all have to work together to try and stop this.
Terry Bell?
Stay with us. More discussion of our panel is straight ahead. You're listening to Civic Media's special coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Keep it right here.
You're so right about agriculture.
I mean, it's just remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that.
Yeah, it's stunning to me up where I'm from.
Five Ohio police, 5 officers shot at this guy?
We just posted the video.
Jesus.
I don't understand why they shot him in the back.
I mean, I don't know why they were involved at all. I don't know why they're even way out beyond the convention.
I don't know. That said, like the hotel where I am, there's a bunch of governors from other states staying out there, so there's state patrol from.
But that's a hotel. This is
that's
King
true.
Park.
That's
this
true.
is not a neighborhood. There's no conventioners there.
20 seconds.
Terry, do you want to start out?
Yeah, we were gonna in the original intro. I was gonna ask Ruth to talk about. Talk
10
about
seconds.
the Examiner.
You got it. Go. You take the lead.
You're listening to a Civic Media News special report. Everything you need to know live from the Republican National Convention. Once again, here's Todd Allbaugh and Terry Bell.
Welcome back. We are at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, as you're probably perfectly well aware of by now. Trygve Olsen and Ruth Conniff are with us. Ruth, I was hoping you could just take a minute to talk to us a bit about the Wisconsin Examiner.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are 5 years old today, actually.
Happy birthday, happy anniversary.
Thank you, yeah. We are part of a network of outlets called States Newsroom. It's a nonprofit news network, and we have our own website, Wisconsin Examiner. Everything on there is free. We have a free newsletter you can get in your email inbox every day, and we cover the state. We cover state news. Our office is right across the street from the Capitol, so we focus heavily on the legislature, state policy, and politics, but we're also out around the state. We have reporters in northwestern Wisconsin, northeastern Wisconsin. We have a reporter who lives in Milwaukee and covers Milwaukee a lot. So we're just filling the gap, as unfortunately daily papers trim back their staff, and there's been a big contraction all over the country, and so nonprofit news is really trying to move to fill that space, and that's what we're doing.
They do a great job, I have to say, Terry. I cite a lot of Wisconsin Examiner. I, of course, always give you credit, but I mean, you guys do some great work, and it's journalism that we don't find other places many times. So I just wanted to say personally, I appreciate what you do, and we love using your journalism.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for picking us up.
Terry?
Yeah, and the Trygve, listeners to Todd's show are well aware of Trygve and his work with the Lincoln Project, but for people perhaps tuning in us for the first time, Trygve, why don't you tell us about the Lincoln Project?
Yeah, so the Lincoln Project was started by a bunch of former Republicans operatives who had worked at senior levels on Republican campaigns, really with two goals. One was to get Donald Trump out of the White House and keep him out of the White House, and the other was to counter some of the Trumpism that we're seeing in the electorate and more broadly extremism on a pro-democracy standpoint. And quite honestly, Terry, for me personally, the work, yes, I'd worked at senior levels on campaigns, but I ended up having, through work I did for an organization John McCain ran, decades of work in places without democracy or places where democracy failed. And so a lot of my work with them has really been focused on how do we confront the extremism and the radicalization that we're seeing across the electorate, which unfortunately we saw a piece of that, just on Saturday in a big way.
And Trygve, was that, I know that's part of why, or the straw that broke the camel's back of why you left the Republican Party, was the criticism by Trump and MAGA of your former boss, the late great John McCain, and some of his work that he did.
Yeah, I mean, that was a piece of it. I mean, another piece of it is having spent a lot of my life living over in Central and Eastern Europe, quite frankly, and having done a lot of work in Ukraine and Russia. I'm a Reagan-esque conservative, I believe. There is an evil empire, and I've seen it firsthand, and my wife's native land was occupied by the Russians for a long period of time. So those two things really led me to say, you know what, I'm not a Republican anymore. I'm still a conservative. And quite frankly, Terry, one of the things that we're seeing with the J.D. Vance pick, not only is he advancing Putin's agenda in Ukraine, but we're seeing them want to have government in the middle of people's lives in ways that, quite frankly, is also antithetical to conservatism.
Yeah,
Amen to that.
Fascinating thing. That's the fascinating thing to me. I don't know. Where do center-right Republicans go now? Is there still room in the Republican Party for them? Does there a new center-right party have to be formed? What do you think?
Well, I think as Todd and I were traveling the state of Wisconsin, one of the things that jumped out at me, and this is true not only of people who are right of center, but I also think there are quite a few people who are left of center and just people who are in the center. There is a growing anger at both sides of the political class about all the division. And, there's a real hunger in this state and in other states as I've been traveling around for more conversation about the good. Most people, when they go to a Green Bay Packer game, aren't wearing a MAGA hat or a BLM hat. They're wearing green and gold. And, there is a strong desire amongst a majority, I think, of the electorate to get back to that working together in a state like Wisconsin. But it's really hard to do when it's in politicians' best interest to get up there and do what Eric Hovde did and scream and yell and basically go jump in a lake.
Ruth Conniff, you follow so many great things at the Wisconsin Examiner. Give us a story or two that kind of surprised you or may have been unexpected in some of your research and reporting so far in this election cycle.
Well, I'll tell you, this is maybe cheating because it's not exactly the Examiner, but I wrote a book about the relationship between undocumented immigrants from Mexico and Wisconsin and Minnesota dairy farmers.
Wow.
And what I found was a shared sense of an agrarian past and a deep respect for a shared culture of hard work. And, a lot of the farmers that I talked to for that book are Republican voters. They voted for Trump twice.
Right.
But, their politics are farther away from D.C. I mean, they don't live and breathe electoral politics. And the fact that there's a group of farmers that go down to Mexico every year to see the homes and villages that the people who work for them have built with the money they made milking cows up here and sort of feel this real interest in these folks and have gotten to try to learn Spanish and get to know their families. And, there is real hope in that. And so I think when you come down from the 30,000-foot view of politics and you get down to the, where people are, I agree with Trygve that, people really would like to have a more constructive approach to life. They, everybody wants to be happy and to, be able to survive and do well and see their children do well. And so I think connecting with that and seeing people kind of on that ground level is really important to stay positive and constructive and not to despair.
I'm going to have to give Terry Bell a booking agent fee because, Terry, we got to have Ruth on our show to have a longer segment to talk about this, the book.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Milked, the American Crisis that brought together Midwestern dairy farmers and Mexican workers.
I think it's fantastic. I grew up at Richland Center. Our 2-year, unfortunately, college there is now closed. I met some of my closest friends. The mother of my godsons now, as a matter of fact, originally from El Salvador, was here on an exchange program at UW Center Richland. These small communities, our colleges bring together, and barriers get broken down when you know someone.
Yeah, and something we did cover at the Examiner is the Whitewater situation,
yes,
which was exploded into this national news story about people being upset, being invaded by Latin American immigrants. Well, it turned out when you talk to the police chief, when you talk to the local officials, people were really welcoming of the immigrants who came to their community. They had gotten screwed out of money from the state legislature and shared revenue, and that's what they were talking about. And the other piece was they said, undocumented immigrants need driver's licenses. That's the crime they were concerned about.
Terry Bell?
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much to Ruth Conniff and Trygve Olsen, to Todd Allbaugh. Behind the scenes, we want to say thank you to Corey Hartman, Chris Casper, and Aaron Zammers. I'm Terry Bell for Todd Allbaugh. You've been listening to Civic Media's special coverage of the Republican National Convention in downtown Milwaukee. We'll do it again at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Good night.
All right, we're out, everybody. Great show.
Fantastic.